Most of what I'm going to talk about today is anecdotal and fairly casual, maybe not as theoretically underpinned as Peter's talk, but I guess I'm sort of presenting the problem and maybe asking you guys to participate in creating, because I think it's in some ways up to us as instructors to create the solutions to the kinds of problems that I ran into during this experience. So I first wanted to acknowledge the fact that I didn't work on this project by myself, and I had a huge amount of help with it. And I think virtually all of us who worked on the project were new to what actually we were trying to do. So we were fumbling a lot, relying on each other's areas of expertise as usual. So, and this kind of comes out of my own practice as an instructor, and I'm raising questions and challenges about what it means to write in the digital age. I think that's sort of the bigger thing that came out of this whole experience. But it's really underpinned by my own predilection to jump into new experiences without much background in those areas. So as much as I ground myself probably in my discipline-specific expertise, because I'm a Restoration 18th century Romantic scholar in literary studies, it's actually these harebrained schemes that I come up with and throw myself into that both energize my teaching and also create huge logistical nightmares for me, but I seem to continually get into those experiences. So I thought that was a kind of visual for how I work. So the project that we worked on together was to create a website that focused on William Hogarth's series of 6 engravings called The Harlot's Progress from 1732. And there are a lot of complicated reasons for why I wanted to focus on this specific work. But one of the reasons came up in the fall of 2014 when we started to get a lot of media attention on the issue of sexual violence in the university environment. And so I thought that when I teach in the 18th century, I always want to make the material that I'm teaching relevant to my students, and I wanted to get them to think about issues around sexual violence, and particularly the bystander syndrome, by exposing them to Hogarth's work. But we did a lot more than that. That was just one aspect of this web project. So I can show you the project, but I know you've all looked at websites before, at least once. So I'm going to save that, and if we have time, or if you're interested in exploring the website, we can do that. But mostly I want to talk about this issue of writing for the web, which was part of the assignment attached to the website creation. So I made this assignment worth a lot for this group of students. So it was worth 35% of the final grade. So that meant that I expected a lot of attention to be given to the project. And I wanted it to be collaborative. I wanted it to be a class project in that kind of old-fashioned pedagogical way. So we had 30 students. I divided them up. 4 of the 5 teams had content-specific areas that they were working on, and we assigned a 5th team to work on editorial stuff. So they wrote the introduction, the brief bio of Hogarth. They edited student writing, and they set standards for the website. And so each content team was assigned to some writing and a collaborative essay. And actually the collaborative essays went really well. It was very smooth. I was quite surprised at how well that went. But the annotations, or captions as we sometimes called them, created huge problems for the students. So initially they said, oh, this is fantastic. You're only asking us to write a few captions of 25 to 50 words each and a 300-word essay. This is so easy. We can this is the easiest course that I'm taking. But by the end of the semester, they admitted that writing these short texts for the web was the hardest thing that they'd ever done in their English courses. So it was a new kind of writing. And, you know, to be perfectly honest, I didn't prepare them for this kind of writing, and I didn't rehearse or practice with them, partly because I assumed that there were resources out there that would be available to help me. So of course I went to the UTSC Writing Center and I said, oh, can you come in and do your workshop on writing for the web for my students? And the response was, we don't have such a workshop. We have never been asked to do this before. So I was kind of surprised, shocked, I guess, in some ways. But we worked together, we cobbled some things together, and we sort of did our best with it. So the students actually thought it was really cool that they were working on a website, and they were also really impressed that I said that the website would be done by the end of the semester. So I wanted, by the end of the semester, for them to have this finished product that they could use, and I pitched it to them since some of my third-year students, or some of my students in the third-year class were actually going to be graduating. They were actually fourth-year students. So I said, you know, you can use this as a legacy project. You can show it to people outside of the university for whatever reasons. But they really struggled with what is this website for, and you know, what presence does it have on the internet? Because in their own, you know, regular consumption of the internet, they don't read geeky academic websites. They use the internet for other things. So they weren't really even that familiar with academic websites. I was really committed to the idea that they would learn a lot about the 18th century by working on this, and that they would do research, obviously, to learn even more about the specifics of Hogarth's series. And I also wanted the website to appeal to you know, a non-specialist audience. I wanted it to be accessible, and we talked about accessible language and not using jargon, etc. And I think that maybe this generated a kind of project that was too much of a hybrid. I was trying to do everything in this one project. So in terms of what that looked like, I can just show you a screenshot from the website. And basically what they were doing was they were taking each of the 6 engravings from Hogarth's series, and they were annotating the engraving. So because there were 4 content teams, and they were each doing 2 annotations per plate, there were 8 annotations on each plate in total. So I wanted them to be curious about the plates and use their research skills in order to develop a kind of deeper understanding of each of the 6 Hogarth plates, and then come to sort of a more global understanding of what they thought Hogarth was actually trying to do with the series. And so this is just an example of one of the things that they picked out of this particular plate and researched. So you can see obviously what this is. And we tried to keep the website very clear and clean, and it was a Drupal template that we used. So we came up with these little small numbers, which were irritating in some ways, but we learned to live with them. And so this was the kind of writing that I was asking them to do. So we had writing workshops, so a couple of writing workshops. As I said, the center didn't have, the Writing Center at UTSC didn't have a specific Writing for the Web workshop. So what Nancy Johnston came up with was a writing workshop on writing concisely and editing for concision. And obviously that was very helpful in this context because the students were limited to 25 to 50 words per annotation or caption. The other kinds of workshops that Nancy and Tom led when they came into the classroom were around writing introductions and conclusions, which was helpful for the collaborative essay. And in addition, we ran a couple of computer workshops. One was on Zotero, so that they were learning how to collect their research sources and cite those sources properly. And we also had a kind of web design workshop. So basically so that they knew how to upload their material to the Drupal site. So the technical side of it wasn't really their responsibility. The digital scholarship unit in the library was taking care of most of the technical side, and they were really largely just generating the content, which was the way that I wanted it, obviously, in a course, a survey course on 18th century literature. You want to be able to focus on the course content side of it. So I was really perplexed by the lack of writing for the web resources, and I found a couple of books, sort of how-to books in the library that I put on reserve, but I don't think any of the students actually ever checked those books out, so which is always an issue with putting books on reserve. And so, I resorted to, Googling it, and most of the stuff that I found by Googling writing for the web were unsatisfactory to me in many ways. So the sources were kind of sort of helpful, mostly business oriented, promoting a less is more ideology that I thought was inappropriate in terms of the kind of complexity that I was trying to emphasize. So maybe that kind of speaks to Peter's talk, that getting students to understand that the complexity part, the thinking part of it, is really important, I think, in our context. I was also disturbed as an English prof that ungrammatical approaches were actively promoted in many of these sources. So writers were encouraged to use sentence fragments that was explicitly stated, use sentence fragments in many of these sources. So this is, I think, an issue in terms of how do we develop skills for writing for the web as instructors, and are we coming up against a kind of brick wall of opposition to our traditional modes of writing that we might have to deal with or push through, or become much more activist and outspoken about the kind of writing we see on the internet. Then there were things that I didn't think of in terms of writing for the web, and I think that these raise really important questions for me in terms of how I might move forward with both teaching the skills of writing for the web and actually getting my students to write for the web. So we did talk about who is the audience for this website, and I thought about putting a kind of beta test aspect into the assignment, but I thought it would be too hard for me to kind of monitor 30 students and find out if their actual tests that they did on potential audience were valid or whether they just made them up or so on. I don't really like to police students, and I thought that that was kind of falling under that policing category. The audience, we kind of came up with this amorphous catch-all audience who would be not necessarily academic, but geeky enough to want to know stuff about Hogarth's series. So it wasn't very clear. What was the critical content of this website, and where should we put it? That was another thing that we didn't think through. We didn't really think through that clearly. I didn't think about teaching things like headline writing, subheads, and chunking. My students aren't journalism students, so they've never been exposed to that kind of writing, that kind of very specific technical and writing that involves a particular kind of thinking and synthesis and analysis of large bodies of material. I didn't think about what kinds of writing search engines like, and this is something that was discussed quite a bit in the web resources, so that was one of the aspects of the web resources that I actually found helpful, is how they addressed issues around, and I think I've written down something about that here. Yeah, so I don't have the technical expertise to kind of work with that, so I would have to, discuss that further with somebody that knows more about it than I do. You won't find our website through a simple Google search, just because of the way that the title has been designed, because it's through the digital scholarship unit at the library, so it comes in through, if you Google them, you would find our website. So that's something that maybe creates a problem for my students who want to use the project as a legacy project. They can't easily show somebody the website unless they have bookmarked that link, or they can remember it, which is probably not that likely. I have seen the URL, sorry. I have seen it on one of my students' LinkedIn pages. She's already put it in there, so she clearly thinks that it's something she wants to let people know about. So I feel that it would be a greater benefit for us to think about the kinds of writing that search engines like. We didn't think that much about the role that links can play. We used links to navigate the site and to move readers from citations to a works cited page primarily. Writing for the web experts suggests that links should be front-loaded with keywords. So, these are things that we need to teach our students to think about. What does that actually mean to front-load with keywords? And they talk a lot about kind of quantifiable stuff, like first 2 words carry the weight. The first 11 characters are the most important. And our students aren't accustomed to thinking about writing in this way at all, I don't think. We also didn't think about, more generally, the role of headlines, keywords, and keyword searches. We didn't think about multiple platforms, what our website would look like on a mobile device, for example. And we didn't think about the importance of metrics. So I thought, when I got the report on my teaching and research from last year, one of the things that I was congratulated for was my podcast, because I had an academic lecture recorded and put into a podcast mode. And so I started to think about, okay, for tenure and promotion stuff, are metrics going to be something that academics or researchers or professors need to think about in terms of the impact of our teaching and research? And so should I be thinking about metrics and who's looking at our website and who's using our website and et cetera? Is that going to be something that my administrators are going to be counting? And Nora talked about the big data thing earlier, and how much we're being tracked in terms of our research, et cetera. So those are some of the things that I didn't really think about, and I think that they're all they're varied, but they all sort of play into this larger topic of writing for the web. And I also wondered about the material that I was continually finding about eye tracking and the fact that people on the internet don't read much. So are we actually wasting our time writing for the web, or obsessing or worrying about writing for the web? Should we be intervening? Are we, maybe I should say 3.0, because I'm kind of not up with the latest stuff, but so should we as instructors of writing or writers, professional writers, should we be setting the standards rather than having it come from the other side, rather than having these more practical, business-oriented users dictating what writing for the web should be? Should we be dictating what writing for the web should be? And so do we need to become more activist in terms of not only what happens, not only what's written, but also how that writing is consumed? And even teaching reading on the web might be something that we're also needing to think about. So, what does it actually mean to generate and deliver content on the internet? So I think that those are the bigger questions. So I had these practical issues where my students just found it really difficult to do this focused and concise kind of writing that was really informed by research. They resisted research largely. As I said, their curiosity was less than I had expected. And so sometimes I had to, actually in one case I had to actually really badger a student into investigating further, because in one of the plates there was a hat hanging on the wall, and it just seemed like a really odd thing. Why is there a hat hanging on the wall? But to get that student to investigate, why would there be a hat hanging on the wall? And if you can't find that out, what kind of hat is this? And what's the status of hats in 1732 in London, et cetera? It was really challenging. And I also had the kind of interesting, I think we've probably all had this experience, but I did have the student who cited the source without using the source. And because I had the book and I knew it very well, I knew that they hadn't used the source. So I had to bring the book into the class and say, okay, this is a really good source. You found a really good source, but now you actually have to read the section that you need to read and use the source. So research was a much greater issue for my students than I had originally thought it would be. And we did teach the students how to do research, and both Chad and Kirsta from the library dropped into class and were available. The students knew them by the end of the term, etc. So I'm just going to leave that. I can show you the website. Think. Maybe not. Doesn't see. Oh, there we go. So yeah, so basically it was very simple. We had, an intro. Maybe this was, from what I've read, we shouldn't have put the pictures below the fold, as they say, because people don't scroll, apparently, on the internet. They only look at the top part. We tried to, we organized it so that you could look at the essays, or you could go to the individual plates. I provided a pedagogical context, which was kind of my backstory. I asked the students to write about the 21st century context, and I excerpted examples of what they wrote. And obviously we had works cited and credits. So just to maybe end with, again, the kind of tribute to my students who really did the actual legwork. So I'll just leave it there, and thank you for your attention, and I hope that I've provoked some questions. I think there's big questions and also like really little practical questions. How do you teach chunking, or how do you get students to translate research into really concise formats like this one? So thank you.
Thanks very much.